Hi guys, welcome back. Well, I've got something really amazing to show you today. See this picture? Think to yourself, what did I use to do this picture? Watercolor? No. Pan pastel? Nope. Pencil? A tiny bit of detail, but not much. Chalk pastel? That's a very good background for chalk pastel. Nope. Well, if it's not watercolor, it's certainly not marker. This is what I used. And I used a cheap makeup brush and some Q-tips to do it. What is this stuff? Well, did you ever see the movie Flubber with Robin Williams? And then there was an older version of it too, where the inventor created something and they didn't know what it was. They just knew it was something. Well, that's kind of like this. I created this. I don't know what to call it because it's not any of the above. It's something different, and it goes on differently, and it reacts differently than any of those products that I talked about. So for now, I'm just calling it, I'm calling it pencil foundation, or it's the best thing that I could think of. Now, okay, the problem with watercolors and the paper that we use for coloring is the water is incompatible with the paper. And I know that we all think it's okay, and it is okay. But anytime you add water to paper that isn't watercolor paper and made for that absorption of the water, you're damaging it. So let's just get that out there. There is no other way of saying it. You're damaging your paper. I've been working hard on different recipes and using different chemicals and stuff to eliminate that water damage. So this is not watercolor. You use no water with this. Some of the other products like the liquid pencil, I was getting closer and closer to this formula. Except I know that a lot of people don't like to use paint thinners and they don't like to use mineral spirits. And I don't blame you. There's an odor. There is none in this. In fact, half the ingredients you can ingest and it would be perfectly fine. In fact, one of the ingredients is quite healthy for you, to be perfectly honest. So this does not have an odor. In fact, this product and this pencil foundation, I guess that's what you call it. I'll let you see it. This foundation colors, you can add an essential oil to it and make it smell any way you like. It could be anything you want it to be. I'm going to teach you how to do this. I'm going to demonstrate how to use it, and I'm going to troubleshoot problems that you can get if you don't get the recipe for this completely right. It's inexpensive. It's going to cost you about $1 a container, if not less. Unlike pan pastels, which are almost $10 per container. I've seen them anywhere from $6 if you go and get it yourself to $10 on Amazon. It's very expensive. Sets $70 for 5. That's ridiculous. And this is compatible with pencils. You can use this with pastels. You can use this with watercolor. And you can seal it. If you don't seal it, it dries like pencil. It feels like pencil. It's pencil in a container, basically. And I'm going to show you how to do it. This is going to be divided up into 2 videos. And I have to do it because it would take me a very long time to do the video how to make it. So today, what we're going to do is we're going to make it. We're going to troubleshoot. And in the next video, which is already done, I made sure it will go up within a day or 2 of this video. It's going to be how to use this, and with several different demonstrations on different applications for this. So what this is an undercoat. We spend so much time trying to bring our tonal values of the paper up to where you can actually start creating art, that a lot of people use marker underneath, and I admit I use marker all the time. The problem with marker is if you're not using Copics, which are really translucent, you're going to get a marker line, and it's also, you can't blend it with pencil. it doesn't blend with anything. You put it on the paper and that's it. Watercolor will at least blend with itself and it'll create a better gradient. With marker, it's that sharp line. It's not perfect, and your tonal value of that object that you're using marker on is determined by the color of the marker. You can't make it lighter, you can't make it darker. We can do that with this. This is, for all intents and purposes, a stain for the paper. And once you stain the paper, it does, to a point, blend with your pencils if you want it to. So you can actually get that smooth gradient. Look what a perfect, there's no line here. Look how perfect it is. I used pink on the bottom. I went into some bluish, some violet, and then into blue. I could have made it darker. I could have made it lighter. I'm going to show you. That's what this foundation does. It's translucent. You're not going to expect to create something that is like top layer perfect. It's not meant to be. This is meant to be that undercoat to stain the paper to the perfect gradient. Now, you could work with pastels. Now, problem with pastels is that it's greasy and pastels don't dry. This dries. I'm going to borrow the pigments from pastels, but we're going to break down the pastel into a usable form that will dry. And I figured out how to do that. And we're going to add some other ingredients in it. One we're going to be adding is linseed oil. Linseed oil can be taken internally. It's actually, if you look it up, it's pretty healthy. We're going to be using mineral oil, which also can be digested. It is not toxic. So we're not going to be adding any toxic products to this. We're not going to be adding any sort of paint thinners to this. The pigment is going to come from the pastel. We're also going to be putting a seal on it by using wax. Basically pencil in a tin. And while I showed you how to do the liquid pencil, which works also, that was a little harsher and it took longer. This took me, I would say, 5 minutes to make from start to finish. With a little bit of, there's some time that you have to wait for it to absorb, the ingredients to absorb into the pigment. Other than that, this was so simple to do. We're going to start with using pastels. The pigment is determined by the pastel you use. And I used Craypas pastels in here, and I do not recommend them. You will see why in the video. The best ones to use, your gallery. Mungai. Those broke down the easiest, had the best pigment. Paul Rubio, I started using at the beginning, and it worked okay, but just like when I was using them in the pastel form, their pigment was just hit or miss. It was exactly the same way. The same colors gave me the same problems. And so it definitely makes a difference. Gallery Mungo pastels are actually less money than Paul Rubio, depending on where you buy it from, right off of Amazon. I saw it this week, the set that I used, which was like the 24 set, for $10. So technically you could be making this product for under $10. It doesn't make a mess with your fingers. Once you're done producing it and putting it in here, there are applicators, no mess, you can use every bit of it. You're not using the pastel down to like a little bit and just smearing it on there with your finger. It dries like a pencil. There's no wait time. It goes on soft. It dries almost immediately because of the beeswax that we're going to put in it. It was so simple to do. You can make up your own colors by mixing the colors of the pastels. Again, it is a stain for the paper. It won't damage your coloring book paper like some of the other products, which thank God. It dries like pencil. This background took me about 7 minutes to do, start to finish, and that was with a learning curve. It goes right on and your whole background is done. And you can do an infinite amount of backgrounds. It doesn't have to just be a fade. You can do anything you want with it. You cannot add mica to paper in its original form. This has to be put into a binder. This acts as a binder for mica. And once you put it on, that mica is not coming off. And I'm going to show you how to do that in the second video. We're going to make a clear version of it for your micas. So all those gorgeous iridescent mica powders that you would love to own and have, but you can't put it into anything, you can now use this directly in your coloring books and it will be permanent. I'm ready to go into full production with this. Now, I've got several different brands. My gallery, I have Paul Rubens. This is another gallery, but it's water soluble. And then I have Expressionist, which I haven't tried. I mean, I wrote with them and tried it that way. They seem pigmented. They were very inexpensive. It's the only full portrait set that I could find, and I want to have a lot of portrait colors. So I'm going to do this full set. I've got plenty of materials. I'm going to pick out some of the ones from the Paul Rubens that I know are a little bit more pigmented. The best ones that I use so far are the gallery. Less expensive than Paul Rubens, and I like it better. So I don't mind replacing my gallery sticks as much as I would not want to replace the Paul Rubens. And I'm so glad I found another YouTuber that specializes in portraits. And he did a test, and he agrees with everything I said originally. Pretty box, there's something off on it, and he agreed with that. So I was very happy to hear that, somebody with more experience than me. I tried the water-soluble ones, and it worked nicely, except it doesn't dry as nicely as the gallery. So I'm going to kind of keep my set of watercolor ones myself. And I did buy another set of watercolor ones I didn't bring out here. And they don't dry as well as the oil ones do. When I use the oil ones for pictures, I actually get a nice crust on it. It doesn't attract dirt. And when I use the aquatic ones, the ones that break down in water, they just reacted like a normal pastel. I didn't get that extra something from it. Today I'm going to be making a full set, and I have to start with the cans. Lucky it's very, very easy. It's easier to cut the can than it is paper. And then I have to completely wash them out and make sure that they are 100% dry. You're going to use a pot, use an old pot, and you're going to make a double boiler. I have about an inch of water on the bottom, and I'm going to heat the water up until it's boiled. Once it's boiling, I'm going to turn it down to just a simmer. I'm using a clean piece of parchment paper, each one of these, so I just ripped off a sheet and enough that I can use this as a cutting board. And I'm going to cut up the pastel. I'm using one pot, has one pastel stick in it. Now you can cut the pastel sticks in half and use 2 different colors and get a custom color too. You just got to play with it. Now I'm using one piece of paper for each color because I don't want to really mix my colors or get them dirty. But the blade cleans off pretty easily. The smaller you cut it, the easier it is to melt down. And now I take it, I put it back in its pot. Okay, now I'm going to throw this out because I don't want to mix the colors. I'm going to take 1 tablespoon of baby oil. And then a teaspoon of linseed oil. 1 tablespoon mineral oil, 1 teaspoon linseed oil. And now I'm going to put it to the side and let that start breaking down. Now I'm going to just do it to all the colors in this set. You guys are ridiculous. She looks like the cat in the bubble. About an hour to prepare all the ones that I want. It's better if you let the oil soak into the pigment. All art supplies from paint to pencils include 3 things: a binder, a solvent, and pigment. These will only be as good as your pigment allows them to be. So if you're using really, really cheap pastels, they're not going to be as pigmented as higher pigmented pastels. The oil, you consider your solvent. So what you see here is a couple of hours and they dissolve. Now, not completely. It's better to wait and let it dissolve like this by stirring for a couple of hours, even if you have to wait 24 hours, because it seems to mesh with the binder a little bit better once that you're using a liquid to a liquid. I've done a lot of experimentation with this. White beeswax that I'm using, the white beeswax pellets, and they look like this out of the box. These I found are the best ones. I use the blocks. The blocks are slightly cheaper, but boy, was that a pain in the butt to grind up. Just not worth for a couple of dollars, not even that much more. It's not an expensive item to begin with. You get 2 pounds of this, and I've made about, I would say 20 to 30 of them already, and I haven't even scratched the bag. For all of this, I've used 1 full thing of baby oil, but I've made a lot of them. I've made what I'm making now because I did all those practice ones. So 1 thing of baby oil is all you need, and a small container of the refined linseed. Then I also bought these individual little sticks. I got 100 of them at the dollar store in a pack. You don't want to have to clean off your sticks, and you don't want to dip your stick or even confuse your stick and use it in 2 different ones. So just to buy some sticks, these are really inexpensive. As I said, I got 100 of them for $1. The craft section at the dollar store, most of them have it. Once it all becomes liquid, which is pretty soon, the tin doesn't really get hot, so it's all pure liquid now. I'm going to take this and I'm going to add in 1 tablespoon of beeswax. And then you're going to wait a few moments and that's going to melt down pretty quickly. Once you start going on this, it goes pretty fast. And just let that melt for a minute or 2. See, there's no rolling boil. You can kind of see the steam coming off of it. That's what you want. And I just keep stirring it, holding it in the water. It's almost there. Now this is coming from experience. These are the better pots to get. The wider ones that are a little bit flatter. And that's because the brush fits into it better. I was making them out of smaller ones. Here's one that I had scraped it out to put it in a larger pot. The smaller ones, you don't get that creaminess on the brush as well as you get this. These are selling for 12 for $6. That's 50 cents per tin. And they come in little packs of 12 that look like this. They're also kind of pretty. So now it's all liquid. Just squeeze and pour. And you're going to have a little bit extra. I leave that little bit of extra in here because you can remelt this and make other colors, which I'm going to do with the extras. So I'm going to just put this to the side and start working on my others. I want to show you what happens when you tweak up the recipe slightly. This is going to be up to you if you create this, but I'm hoping to save you a little bit of time and maybe expense and show you some of the experiments that I did do. This is the 1 teaspoon of linseed oil to 1 tablespoon of mineral oil to 1 tablespoon of beeswax. These are a little bit different. And I wanted to show you also this. Now, I know this looks like just a blob of nothing, but this was my tester sheet. On this side, this whole area over here, I did a little bit different. I wanted to see what happens if I didn't add the binder, the wax. And it's been a day. And if you notice on this one, it did not set at all. You must have the binder. The beeswax is very important. Play with the amount of beeswax. I'll show you what happens when you do. This side is this. It has the consistency on the paper like a regular pastel. You know that sticky feeling that doesn't go away and never dries? That's what it has on this side of the paper. On this side of the paper, it didn't dry at all. It didn't set, it didn't dry. Now why is it like this? Well, on this side of the paper, it was allowed to soak into the paper, okay? And what happened was the mineral oil separated down, leaving the pigment on the top. The pigment is sticky. I'm sure it has a little bit of binder in it also because the pastel itself had binder originally. So I'm dealing with the binders that were already in it, but with the amount of mineral oil that I used, it overpowered those binders. Those binders could not set it. And it soaked, the mineral oil separated out, the mineral oil being the solvent, separated out, leaving the pigment and maybe some of the binder on the top, and then it soaked into the paper. On this side, I had tested originally, and you could see it over here, it's like shiny. I had put a sealer over it. I wanted to see what happened. Would it accept a sealer? Would it change? It actually accepted a sealer very nicely, and the sealer dried and there was no sticky residue feeling at all. But then I put no binder paste over it. The oils could not sink down into the paper, so it just remained in its original state and it does not dry. So that is one thing you just don't want to do. You don't want to leave out the wax completely. Then we have this one. And if you notice on this one, my fingers are so dirty by now. When I rub into it, it's like the stuff that they use for painting faces. That's what it kind of feels like, and that's what it actually looks like. It's very greasy. When you put it on the paper, it will soak into the paper. You get a much higher grade of pigment on it. You can see it right there. And so your pigment is really nice. This was made with 1 tablespoon of mineral oil, 1 teaspoon of linseed oil, and 3/4 of a tablespoon of the beeswax. So that 1/4 teaspoon really made a difference in the consistency. Now, I like this consistency. You can use it and you could spray over it and you'll lose that tackiness and the pigment goes up higher. Okay, that's an option. It's a viable option that you can do. I tested it a second time just to make sure. Look how pigmented it is. This has a way higher pigment than, say, the watercolor look. This has more of the consistency of a regular pastel, if you were going to just use the pastel and smear it on the page. And I used the same ratio that I did with the blue. So that's that. Now, for whatever reason, these came out weird. And I believe what happened was I used a double amount of beeswax in it. It should have been that red color, but it's got all this yellow, which I'm pretty sure is the beeswax in it. And the pigment is kind of at the bottom. So it comes out red even though it's yellow. Well, that's the pink. I don't even know what that is. Wait a minute. It's just got pockets of pigment in it. So this one went all sorts of wrong. And I kind of wanted to like pry it up and see what's on the bottom. And I'm going to do that in front of you. Just get something to pry it up with. Okay, so now I know exactly what it is. I have a whole thing of beeswax layer on the top. And all the pigment you could see is down here. So this one was not mixed good enough. That's what the problem is. So I bet you I can melt this down again, stir it up, and it'll probably be fine. The consistency of it seems pretty good. A little soft, but I bet you that I could fix this. So maybe I'll do that as an experiment tomorrow. And it happened again with this one. It dried really weird. But I remember this one, doing this one, and it was like that even though I mixed it really hard. It was probably the pastel that I used. This was not the Gallery pastel. This was the one that I bought. It was really cheap, and it was the not thinking of the name. But it's very funny because I saw a review done by somebody who works with pastels all the time, and this was a brand that they absolutely hated, thought it had this really weird, funky pigment in it, and did not like it at all. So I'm going to agree with them that this brand was not as good. So far, out of all like the cheaper pastels, the Mango Gallery has been the best. And they're not even the most expensive. They're like inexpensive. I saw them on Amazon. They were on sale for like $10 for like a 24 set. So that's the pigment that I'm going to stay with for at least now, unless I see a review of a pastel that's decent priced. Those are the only ones that came out like that. Black did it a little bit, and this came from that other cheap set. So I'm not going to even probably bother. I'm going to probably just throw these out. And no, not to use that set anymore. So that's what happens when you tweak up this recipe. You're going to get either really oily. Now, if you go too hard on the beeswax or too much beeswax, it's going to become very hard and difficult to use. So right now, I'm sticking with my formula. It works. I made beautiful pigments. I could start using them in a day or two. Today I decided I was going to troubleshoot the few that came out a little weird looking. These are the two that I took apart, and it seemed to have a layer of wax on the top, which I thought was caused by me not stirring it up enough. So I remelted it, I stirred it up completely, and if you can notice, it did the same thing. So there's something in this that's no good. And the same thing with the dark brown. The inside is very soft when I stirred it up, and then the wax seems to be floating on the top. So this recipe, for whatever reason, is not compatible. This came from that other set that I don't recommend. Name is on the screen, and that's no good. The one thing I did not try was melting down the pastel and just adding the wax. And as you can see, it looked this way when it was in the pan, and I made sure I really stirred it up. And if you could see it, there's a white ring in there. Now this is caused because there's no solvent. There's only wax and whatever pigment was in the stick. So there's no mineral oil, there's no linseed oil, and I got this. Now I should be able to just melt this down, add the solvent, and this should be normal. We'll see. I'm going to do that in a little bit. This is the one that was completely liquid. It did not firm up at all, and I knew that I must have forgotten to put the wax in it. So I went back, added the wax, and as you can see, it's completely solidified, reacting totally normal. It's been a long video, and if you're still here, wow. So in the next video, I'll be doing several different demonstrations. One, how to do it in a coloring book. There are some different effects that you can do with this, not just the fade. I'll be showing that. Let's cut it here, and I will see you then. Take care. Bye-bye.